Welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4. We got things figured out with the man Frank SCALISH. Hey, we scheduled a program. We had a show. We even had a topic that we're going to talk about today. And then the wonders of technology. But hey, we are live. We are good to go. Looking good, Frank.
Amen. Amen, brother. I'm fine, man. I'm just watching the snow come in. We're probably done in open water for a little while.
Yeah. I'm calling you out right off the hopper. So right before we went live, we were ranting about fishing in close quarters, and I think your idea is brilliant. Would you care to share with our viewers and listeners what your idea for close quarter fishing is?
Yeah. I think that as a professional angler, you should have a paintball gun with you.
Completely harmless.
Completely harmless.
Don't aim for the head.
Never. And if somebody encroaches on your water, you nail them with the paintball. And if they got paint on them, they're out of the tournament.
Can't weigh in if they've got paint on the jersey.
Can't weigh in if they got paint on the jersey.
Because that means you got too close.
That's right.
I love it.
I even have a strategy.
You can't just wait. You can't ambush.
Oh, all right. Well, then never mind. Never mind. Forget it.
Oh my gosh, Frank. I'm struggling this morning. I filmed a guide day episode that's going to run tomorrow on BTL, and I picked up JP, who was in town from New York, but he was up in Tulsa. Man, I didn't get back till like 1 a.m.
How far is Tulsa from you?
Like an hour and a half.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little commute.
Yeah, but I'm sure you know those mornings sometimes you just wake up and you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and then other mornings you wake up and you're like, I would pay a lot of money to stay in bed for an extra hour this morning.
Oh yeah, 100%. I understand that. Sometimes, dude, sometimes I'm so motivated that I usually wake up before my alarm clock goes off.
So do I.
So like if I set the alarm clock for 5:30, I'm usually up at 5:15.
Regardless of whether you're fishing or whether it's a crappy day, like that's just what your body does.
That's just what my body does. And lately I've been blowing through the alarm clock, dude. Like throwing it on the floor. I mean, I don't even
hateful at it.
Oh yeah, just it's this time of year for me. As soon as I have to put my fishing equipment up, I struggle really hard for the first few weeks because.
So how long are you out of commission for fishing wise then? So you got to fish kind of late this year, right? The last couple years?
Every year it's about the same. It's the first week in January and then it starts to get dicey. But we're going to have like 4 days in single digits and teens. And that's just going to glaze everything over. And then and that'll be the end of it. Unless we get a warm rain or something, and then we might open up. Some of the lakes might open up, and we could sneak out if we can. I hate this time of year.
Now, will you get out on the ice?
I do ice fish, but I don't go on Lake Erie. I have a phobia about that lake, and I won't go out on it.
Because that's where I think Red Lake up in Minnesota, it's big, giant, but that's where giant chunks of fishable ice breaks away from the main body of ice, and now all of a sudden you're on a raft out in the middle of Lake Erie in January.
Right. Well, and that happens. I had a guy I know. He got stuck out there overnight on an ice chip floated away. It was about a mile long. You know, when you're vertical jigging down that ice hole, and all of a sudden your line starts to go that way. There's an issue. You're trolling on the ice.
All right. Last week during the show, we kind of pumped Lure Nets, the graffiti cross series, in both the hard knockers and the one knockers. We had not actually gotten to lay eyes on that. Well, you had, but I had not gotten to lay eyes on them at that point. And I must say, they are a thing of beauty.
They are very cool. So I ordered them after that show.
Wait a second. We go over this every time.
Yeah.
You're Frank SCALISH. You should get 2 of everything in every size and color that they make. That's what you do. That's literally your job.
Right. And so I ordered a bunch of them because
Who do I need to talk to over there, Frank? Make sure that when it comes to the new releases, that Cleveland Heights gets an order.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the long and short of it is, for whatever the reason, I haven't gotten them yet. And usually, LureNet, usually if I order something off of LureNet, I have it in 2 to 3 days.
Yep.
Like, regardless. And I ordered them, after our show last week, and I don't have them yet. So they're probably held up at, here. They're probably held up
because
here.
you guys had that weather system come through.
It's not, like, to me, it's not terrible. The weather's not terrible. I mean, it's ugly, but it's not
That's what
terrible.
they look like, by the way.
Oh, they're so good. They are so good.
How many different colors did they actually do? 5.
5 different colors, so I ordered 6 of everything, all of those colors. That one to me has a lot of merit. I really
chartreuse.
Oh yeah, dude, I like that color. And the robin egg blue belly is another one that up north, dude, forget it, because we have crayfish that have that robin egg blue on them up here.
Robin egg blue.
Yeah, that to me, that's dynamic. Now look at the bone belly. I got the bone belly one because to me that's a bait fish imitator, and so I got that to imitate bait fish. Obviously, all the other colors are more crawdaddy. Now that's an olive belly, olive eye sockets, olive belly. That's really subdued. That's really cool. And then, of course, you got to have something with red in it for spraying.
Absolutely.
You have to.
So there you are, $8.99 on. Well, that was my email. $8.99.
All the problems that we had this morning.
We'll just remove that.
Yeah, all the problems we had this morning with emails, dude. That is so funny that popped up there.
Hey, you know what it is? If someone was trying to get something out of it, it is all you could see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 undelivered or undeliverable links to today's show. I don't know what the hell was going on.
I don't know what's going on either. I don't know if it's me coming from me or you, but I got emails this morning already, so who knows?
Yeah. Good question. So on that graffiti craw, on those, he's saying, why those colors other than just looking cool? Like, is there any merit to like kind of the finish or that G flash?
Yeah, I like that oil finish on them. It reflects a lot of different colors in the water. So I really like that a lot. I know that, and that crayfish don't reflect light exactly like that. But when you're throwing a rattle bait, most of the time it's a reaction bite. And so that really helps. It helps the fish see it better. It has a different flash in the water to it.
It's different, but it also looks cool. Like you're gonna catch a bought it. But I mean, dude, sometimes you spend $8.99 to buy a bait that looks badass, and this is one of those baits.
100%.
Like you can't say, oh, I'm gonna catch 10 more fish than I would have with a regular red craw. But dude, when you're throwing it, you're probably gonna be like, that looks pretty badass.
Yeah, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm catching one on it on this cast.
I mean, those are the colors where you tell your buddies, hey, look at this.
Oh,
look at what I got.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, it's real. I mean, they're super cool, and they look way better in person. Way better.
And then it also goes, do any colors get tested before release nowadays? That's a hell yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. My FX colors were tested prior to me even sending them to them. Because the FX colors on the suspending rattling rogue, the way that I multi-layered pearls, the way I did that, like if you're going to throw one color, like let's say you're going to throw violet cream, for example, that bait will look different in clean water than it does in off-colored water, than it does in dirty water because of the overlay on the pearls of it. It refracts the light differently in those different conditions. It they're phenomenal. Those colors they work. They're phenomenal. And so yeah, so the truth of the matter is, yeah, I fish them prior to because I paint them. So I always paint some for me to fish with before I send them in.
Mhm.
I've had paint jobs that I've done that I fished with and didn't like them and scrapped them. So I mean, you know, it's not a guess. It's not a guess. Um, and then there's videos out. I think might be it might be Luke Palmer might have a video out throwing that thing, and he's wrecking them on it, dude. I mean, wrecking them on it. So yeah, they work.
I don't want to and don't get offended by this terminology, Frank. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. Not that I would ever put a cat in a bag, but
At least
I
not
know
without rocks in
you're
it.
a cat guy.
At least no. Go ahead.
But we may or may not get to look at some more colors next week, correct?
Oh, we are. We
Okay.
are looking at them.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Oh, dude, I also just recently I thought of you last week. I was fishing with a buddy, and he was telling me what his wife does for a living.
Yeah.
She runs a cat cafe. I'm not kidding. So it's like you make a reservation, and it's like a cafe on one side, and then you have a reservation for the cat room. So they work with the like animal shelters and adoption agencies. So they have 20 to 30 cats in a cat friendly room with all sorts of toys. So you eat lunch, and then the other half has plate glass windows, and then you walk through and you play with 20 to 30 cats for however long you have bought to play in the cat room. And then should you become bonded with one, you have the option to adopt it and take it home.
Oh, how neat.
It's called a cat cafe.
All right. That's good.
You'd be all in on that, wouldn't you?
I would if I didn't have a cat, but I have two now.
You have two, yeah, and Jeffrey's too. So whenever you guys, it's in the Sunshine State. So the next time you guys are in Florida, the cat cafe is on me.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. All right, what are we talking about today, Frank?
Well, I got some DMs the other day. We never talk about Texas rigging, slip sinkers, the easy stuff, this quote unquote easy stuff. We never get into it. And I thought, you know what? That'll be a good subject matter. So I sat down the other day and I started just jotting down some ideas. And then I started to realize that this is way more in depth than you just, rig something up on a slip sinker and chuck it out there, flipping or pitching. So I thought I would dive into it. We're going to get pretty deep in it, but it's not going to be terrible because there's a method and a reason for everything. So it'll follow a good chronological order. And so I'd like to get into that because when guys DM me about a subject matter, if I get 2 or 3 of the same, we're doing a show on it. Because law of averages are if there's so many people that are following Instagram and then I get 2 or 3, I guarantee you there's a lot more that want to hear the same thing. And so I've been doing that throughout day 4 and it's been very successful. So I said, this is good because we've never really dove in on it. We've touched on it a few times in some of the weed episodes, shallow flipping grass and stuff. We've touched on it, but I think we'll get in it. You want to just get in it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a number one rule whenever I'm Texas rigging anything is I use the absolute lightest weight that I can get away with. That's based on your conditions. So that being said, what's going to affect my weight size really is what you're thinking about. So the first thing I think of is how heavy is the cover? Obviously, is it wood? Is it grass? Is it rock? Um, that's obviously very important. Another important thing is how deep am I fishing? Um, I could be fishing deep brush piles. I could be fishing shallow blowdowns. I could be fishing shallow bushes, docks. So how deep am I fishing? And then another thing you have to take into consideration is how much wind do you have? Because wind is going to affect the drop rate on that bait or your ability to put it where it has to go, because you're going to have wind drag on your line. And so if you have a bow in your line when you're doing this, it could be moving the bait away from your target and not letting it get down on the target. Another thing to think about that I think is probably almost the most overlooked is my line size. What kind of line am I throwing? Obviously, if you're punching, you're throwing 50-pound braid or 60-pound braid. And of course, you're using a weight to match your terrain that you're fishing and everything else. So the line size is important because that controls your fall rate. Late night Taco Bell.
Anthony, you're talking about what affects your weight size. Anthony,
Oh
point
my
out
gosh.
that late night Taco Bell affects his weight
That
size.
is priceless, dude.
All right, back on track. Sorry,
Yeah,
you got
and
you have to get better at reading the comments without completely derailing the
disengaging,
show.
right? Without disengaging. That's why I shut the comments off on my computer, because
Okay.
I can't focus on
Yeah,
both.
I
So
I do. That's I have to. So
yeah, but you're good at it. I'm not
all
good
right,
at that.
continue.
Okay,
That was a
so
good one though. That one I couldn't let that one slide.
no, you had to put that up there. Okay, so the line size is going to control your fall rate, um, based on your slip sinker size. And then another thing to take into account, which I think people don't always do, is how aggressive are the bass, because that'll determine a lot. If they're very aggressive, that'll determine a lot. Um, so uh, another critical thing, and this is probably the most critical thing when you're pitching and flipping, um, when does that bite come? When do you get that bite? Is it when the bait's on the bottom, when it's on the fall, or just about when it hits the water? So the reason that you look at these things is because if the bait gets bit on the bottom, then you can use a heavier weight because you want to get it to the bottom then. Because the bass, that's where the bass are relating. If a bass hits it on the fall, that means they're suspending within that cover and they hit it on the way down. So this is when I'll start to lighten up the weight a little bit, because maybe now I'm going to get more bites as it falls slower through there. Now, if the bass are real aggressive, maybe when it shoots by them, they react on it and get it. But for the most part, if they're suspended in the cover, I'm using a lighter weight.
Okay.
If I pitch out there and the bait hits the water and my line goes, then I'm going to use the lightest weight of all, because those fish are right up against the top layer of the water, or they're just underneath feeding up. So then I'm going to use the lightest weight of all. Now, when this happens, okay, when you pitch out there and your line just goes shoo, and you immediately, you may have to start thinking of a different technique. You may be spinner
Weightless
baiting.
Cinco, top water,
Right.
spinner bait, wake bait.
100%. When that happens, you might have to analyze, because you might be missing fish because those fish are so close to the surface and reacting. So when that occurs, then I'm going to start thinking about what I'm doing. Hooks is another thing. Hooks. This is where I'm going to get a lot of hate mail. I don't flip with a straight shank hook. I actually can't stand them. Here, I'll just show you real quick. There's a couple of reasons. Now, I know there's guys that proved otherwise a million times over. They proved otherwise that the straight shanked hook is the best flipping hook. And
You have one. That's a straight shank.
yeah, that's a straight shank.
Yeah.
So they prove that it's the best thing in the world and blah, blah, blah. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just rig it on a Ned rig, only because this will just illustrate my point.
Okay.
So when you rig it the typical way, Texas rig. And then I'm going to see where that hook goes into the bait. And then I'm going to put the hook in the bait. All right. So now this is why I don't like them. Okay. Now remember, this is just a little Ned rig, but who cares? You have to, when you set the hook on this, you have to push the hook all the way through this plastic. Now I'm going to hold the back of this bait and just pick up on the hook. And you see how it's barely coming through. And I'm actually doing this with a lot of force. So you have to get this part of the hook through the plastic, get the plastic out of the way, and then get that hook into the fish.
Okay.
All right. It seems like you're like, oh, I'm using a flipping rod and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a piece of cake. But that's tough. Okay. This is tough right here. So I use the Mustad Ultra Point, which you guys hate, but I don't really care. I know. I don't.
The last time you went through that hook shape, how many DMs did you actually get that was salty about that hook?
A lot. But I don't care because here, I'll be honest with you. I don't lose fish.
Yep.
I don't lose fish, so I'm not changing a thing. So what I do with this, and the reason I like it so much, okay, this hook, it's not like an EWG hook where this part of the hook is straight. It angles down a smidge, okay? And the reason I like that so much is because now I can texpose this thing. So let me do this. So what if for those watching, I'm doing a texpose hook.
There's so many good screenshots of Uncle Frank with the 3-inch Ned on a flipping hook. People are going to click on that I'll be like flipping Ned or punching Neds.
Right. Okay. So you see the hook's texposed. You see it on the top.
Yep. You can see the hook point. So you're through for those listening on iTunes.
Right. I'm through the plastic and then I just
texposing it.
I'm texposing it. Now, what happens there is the minute this thing crunches down, that hook pops right out. And now I don't have to go through all that plastic to get the fish hooked up because it's immediately out of the way. The minute the fish presses down on the soft plastic, the hook's immediately going into the fish. That's why I use it. I punch with this hook. I Carolina rig with it. I flip and pitch with it. And I never have a problem.
Okay.
So the only thing you got to remember when you're choosing a hook, because everybody's going to have their own personal preference. So when you're choosing a hook, you look at the thickness of the soft plastic and you make sure the gap is 2 times that. 2 times the thickness. So if you're talking about the hooks I use, there's a 1/0, a 2/0, a 3/0, and a 4/0. Okay. So this is the gap in here from the hook point to the shank is your gap.
Okay. So that's what I was always wondering when they were talking about how big the gap is in the hook. It is the hook point and you make a direct line to the shank.
Right in here.
That is the gap. Okay.
That's the gap. So
because there's a bunch of different ways you could measure that.
Correct. So this is the shank length. This is the gap.
Yep.
Okay. So that's the hook thing. I
2x.
No, I just throw the regular Ultra Point.
No. You want 2 times the
2 times
distance.
2 times the distance. So for
that just allows the plastic to get out of the way and clear.
Right. So for those that like the straight shank hook, this is the gap. This is the gap right in here.
Okay.
All right. And so as long as it's 2 times the thickness of the soft plastic can get out of the way. And that's my rule of thumb. The other thing I do when, especially with soft plastics, is I always use glass rattles in all my soft plastics. I don't throw a lizard, a worm, a woolly bug, a beaver, a spine craw, speed craw, Christie critter, brush hog. I don't put none of that on without a rattle in it. So now what I want to do is I want to show you where the rattle position goes, and I'll show you why. So here I have two rattles. This is going to be, if I drop one of these, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, we'll come back after Frank is done and talk about exactly.
I did drop it, but I caught it.
Did you catch it? I saw
caught
that.
it. I caught
Speaking of cat-like reflexes.
Yeah, dude. I listen.
We'll go back through and try to locate where you guys can purchase these glass rattles.
Okay, so I have a small and a medium.
Yep.
Let me see if there. I'll put it on the blue. Small and a medium. The small's thinner. Medium's fatter. Small's thinner. Yep. Great catch. We're gonna do that in slow motion later. And so anyway,
I could actually do that.
You could. So here's what I want to show you. I want to show you the positioning of this, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to take, this is a yum lizard, and you can do this with any lizard, but I'm going to show you where I put it in this, and then I'm going to rig it on the hook and show you why. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look at the lizard, and I'm going to insert the rattle by the throat of the lizard, and I'm going to put it in, so I'm putting it in towards the head, pushing the rattle in towards the tail. So I'm going to have to do this because my lighting in here is in my face and I can't see. So what I do is, and I'll stop it right there. So I'm going to start right there.
Yep.
And then I'm going to run it right in the lizard, pushing it down towards the tail.
You don't have much room for error there.
No, there's not room for error, but that's where it is. It's right in the neck of the bait, right there. Okay. So now when I rig it on the hook that everybody hates, except for me, when I rig it on the hook, it's going to be perfect because I push the lizard into the hook, right to where it's starting to bend. You see where it's starting to bend? I pull it through so it's straight in the middle of the lizard. And then I'm going to run it around, and I tie my own keeper systems on these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it lays like that. And then I'm going to pick my spot, and I'm going to text pose this thing. This is so money. So it's text posed.
Yep.
You see it, right?
Yep.
Okay, now look where the rattle is. The rattle's right here.
So it is in the basically on the shank of the hook.
Right. It's on the shank of the hook.
In between the hook point and the eye of the hook.
Correct. So when the bass bites it, the rattle's never in the way.
Now, why don't you just put it below in the butt of the lizard?
Okay, so this is what I'm going to, the reason why is because you see how flexible this thing is?
Yep.
I don't want to lose that.
Oh, yeah, it's brilliant.
Because when I'm flipping over brush and that lizard's walking around the brush, I don't want to impede any of this action on the bait when it's fluttering down.
That makes sense.
I don't want that getting in the way of it. I want that thing as natural as possible falling over. So that's why I do that. Now I have a list of soft plastics and the hooks I use in them, but I do use this 2-aught in the lizard. I found it to be the best for hooking up percentages. I don't want the hook all the way back here in the meat of the lizard. I want everything close to the head. Here's why. If you've ever seen underwater footage of a bass taking a bait, a bottom bouncing bait, they always pick it up from the head first. They grab it from the head first. They very rarely grab a bait from the tail. As it falls, they pick it up head first because that's how they have to swallow it. They can't eat a bait fish by the tail. They have to swallow it head first. And so, and a crayfish, if a crayfish is slithering along, bouncing along on the bottom, they're running tail first because crayfish go backwards. And so they pick them up that way. Their pinchers are forward and the bass can swallow them easier. If you're using a jig and you get that double bump where it goes and then all of a sudden you got them, it's because they pick it up backwards, spit it out, and swallow it in head first. And that's why you get that. So that's the lizard. Now I'm going to show you on beaver style baits where I put these rattles, because this is another, I just trashed the lizard, so we're not using it anymore. So on a beaver style bait, this is a woolly bug, but any beaver style bait, this is what I do. Now I'm going to take the bigger glass rattle on it. And what I'm going to do with this, and this is important, I always put the rattle in, starting in towards the head and pushing it in towards the tail. I don't ever do it the other way because the rattle has a tendency to pop out the other way because it goes against the way the bait's moving and stuff. So what I'll do here is I pick a side, and then I'll take the rattle in on the side in the same place, and I'll push it in on the side. You see where I started it?
Yep.
And then I shove it in parallel to the center of the beaver. So you can't even
tell there's one in there.
You can't even tell there's one in there.
Holy cow.
But it's right there. It's right there.
And you just hear a little click.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, so in my aquarium, when I had bass and stuff in my aquarium and crayfish and everything else, you could actually hear crayfish making these little ticks and clicks if you put your ear up to the glass on the tank. They actually, and they're very tiny little subtle, they just make these little noises. And that's why I never, ever throw a soft plastic without a rattle in it.
Regardless of water clarity.
Regardless, I don't care.
Table rock to the Sabine River.
It doesn't matter, because what happens with these little glass rattles, it's a subtle, tiny little click and a tiny little, ticks and clicks. The bigger rattles, the brass rattles and the plastic rattles that you put on the back of your jig, they're way louder than this, way louder. That's when I'll choose rattle or no rattle. But for the most part, when I'm using soft plastics, I'm always using the glass rattle. Now, here's another thing. If you need more noise, you can put another one in on the other side.
Okay. So these are bass rattles, right? Not crappie rattles?
They're bass rattles, just smalls and mediums. They make a giant one, but I don't like the giant one because I don't want to push my plastic apart so far that it starts to change the color of the bait.
You know the brand or anything of that? Like if people wanted to see, because look, I'm looking at this. Bobby Garland has the premium glass rattles, but those are too small. Those I've used those, and for a bass lure, the plastic muffles the sound of the crappie rattle in a bass bait. Is that a fair assessment?
It's fair. It's very fair. But those little rattles are nice if you're throwing
like a finesse worm or something.
Yeah, real skinny worms. They're real nice.
And then the other one that they have obviously is the LaRue glass rattle, but it doesn't even have a sharp point on it. It's meant to be stuffed up into a
hollow body.
Bug.
Yeah, it's a hollow body. So anyway, so I'm trying to get the rattle out, and you can see.
Yep.
So this is why I put it in this way, because if I put it in backwards, if the bass jumps,
it's gone.
It's forcing the rattle out, and so that's why I put them in backwards. But I do that with all my soft plastics. Always
What do you
use
just
a
keep
rattle.
50 rattles in a little pack?
Yeah, I have a little tiny, those pill bags that we saw
Okay.
last time. I just keep those. I keep about 50 rattles of each, 2 pill bags, big ones, or,
Mhm.
the bigger rattle, skinny rattle. Um, and that's what I do. And I have so much confidence in that glass rattle that I absolutely will never throw a bait without it. Even when I'm shaky heading, I put a rattle in the same place when I'm shaky heading because I want that little clicking and ticking stuff. Because I shaky head a lot of cross style baits like the Yum Spine Craw. It's one of my
Yep.
favorites. And this bait, I do the Speed Craw too, the Zoom Speed Craw as well. But you got to realize something. This bait here, the body segment on the Spine Craw, is about an eighth of an inch longer than on a Zoom Speed Craw. So on a shaky head, this thing is absolute money because the hook's not coming out to the back of the bait. The hook is right where it's supposed to be, and then my rattle will be right in the middle of it.
Okay. That makes sense.
And so it's perfect. Now, the only time I don't put a rattle in a soft plastic is if I'm Carolina rigging. Because the weight and your bead are making the racket, and I want the soft plastic to be floating free. I don't want to add any extra weight to the plastic. So that's the only time that I don't do that. Now, I mean, I have a list of weights and sizes and stuff that I throw on each thing for the most part. Um, the easiest one probably is punching. Punching is by far almost a no-brainer with a Texas rig and a weight. But I still go to the lightest punch weight I can. So 95% of the time I'm using a 3/4 ounce weight. There are those times when the mats are thick and I got to go to an ounce, ounce and a quarter. But I found that those mats there, I'm not as frequently encountering
Right.
where I can get the 3/4 through it because I can shake it up on top of the mat or give it an up, pitch it up and let it go down there. The weight size only matters to get through the vegetation, to get through what you're punching, because then I do a controlled fall with my bait. And one tip on punching, I'll punch it through and I let it go down. It hits the bottom. I pick it back up to the underneath the canopy. So my bait's underneath the canopy like this. And I'll hit it up against the top of the canopy.
You've mentioned that a couple times over the past couple years.
Yeah, I have absolutely the canopy will just go.
That's a bluegill. That's what they think it is. They think it's a bluegill eating something off of the underneath of the mat, right?
Right, it could be, but if you've gone under,
craw underneath too.
Right, the crayfish, they eat the snails and the small zooplankton off of the grass. So some of this grass, they'll have crayfish all over them. And so that's why it's important, because sometimes those bass are keying in on that.
Yep.
Sometimes they're keying in on when it busts through. And sometimes they want it on the bottom, where I slam it on the bottom a couple of times.
Poof, poof.
Yeah, just make that debris cloud as it hits the bottom a couple of times. But that's pretty much it with punching. I don't make it complicated. And even when I'm punching, I'm not using the straight shanked hook, because here's another thing that happens with the straight shanked hook. And this is what annoyed me the most about it, more so than anything else. So we're going to put it in here, poke it out there. We're going to rig this thing up like you do. And this is a good punching hook. I mean, this is a good straight shank hook. But so when it's rigged up nice and straight,
looks good to me.
right. The first couple times you throw it, you're in business. But after you're dropping it in through the cover, through the grass or whatever, after a little while you'll get grass and slime on your hook shank, and then all of a sudden this thing won't stay on it anymore. It keeps coming out. And the last thing and I've had this happen a million times, the last thing I want to do is make a perfect pitch. And right when that bait hits the water, this thing is free and I got an open hook going down into the cover.
Yeah, you're screwed.
That's a wasted cast. That's the other reason I don't use the straight shank. And I know I'm going to get flack from it because I got a lot of pro buddies of mine that swear on this. And they're not wrong for them. But for me, I don't lose fish doing what I'm doing. So I am not changing it at all. So if we go craw baits like the Yum Spine Craw, a Zoom Speed Craw, Christie Craw, any craw bait, for the most part, I'm using my 2-aught hook because the baits aren't very thick. They're not thick bodied. I'm using my 2-aught Megabyte Ultra Point, Texas rig weight size. I always use the lightest I can get by with, but 90% of the time I'm probably on a 1/4 ounce.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go up or down from there, depending. My 3 favorite sizes is a 3/16, 1/4, 5/16. Very rarely am I on a 3/8 or a half, but I do use them on certain conditions you need them. The one thing I forgot to mention, the other thing that can dictate your weight size is current. If there's a lot of current in the place. So what you like on the Mississippi River, perfect example. If you're flipping outside edges of eelgrass and stuff on the main river, there's a current flow. So rather than have that bait go right down into the bottom of the eelgrass, because bass are ambush predators, I use a lighter weight. I pitch it upstream and I work the bait down with the current. So I'm drifting it down. So if the grass edge is all erratic, I cast out there and I'm bouncing it around that erratic edge of the grass. The bass will sit in that grass and ambush whatever is coming by. I get more bites that way. Now, there are times when they might be buried up under, cold front conditions or neutral feeding zone where they're buried up. Then you got to get something through it and get it in there and get it through it, get it to the bottom. That's when you go to the heavier weight. About the lizards because I already talked about it. I just use the 2-aught hook in it. For the most part, I'm 3/16, 1/4, 90% of the time. Christie Critter, brush hog style baits. Depending on if you're going to use like the big Christie Critter or the full-size brush hog, then I'm going to have to go to the 3-aught because here, look, this is a fat ombre. So I'm going to have to go to the 3-aught in that. But if I'm using a baby brush hog or a small Christie Critter, the 2-aught is more than enough hook.
Well, okay, let me ask you this. When just a general rule of thumb when it comes to hooks, would you, because you got guys who are bank fishing, you got guys who might run out of different sizes. Would you rather, if you had to, have a hook that was a little bit too small for the plastic or a hook that was too big for the plastic?
I would always go a little bit too small for the plastic. And
really?
I'll tell you why. In Florida, we were fishing that one year that Bassmasters said we had to go to this, I don't know what they called it, not a championship, but a
Angler of the Year.
Fish off on Okeechobee.
Oh, was it the last chance qualifier?
Yeah, it was the last chance qualifier.
Did Ben Matsubu win that?
I think he might have. So I got on these fish on these shell beds offshore. And I was, God, am I pissed. I was Carolina rigging 10-inch worms. And
You're still pissed.
Yeah, I'm still pissed. And shaky heading 10-inch worms. And I the first cast out with the rig, I get one on about 8 pounds, and
Big one.
it rolls in front of me and comes right off.
Mm.
And I was like, holy crap, maybe just things went wrong. So I re-rig, I fire back out there. I get one about 6 pounds. I jack them, I get him. I'm fighting him to the boat. I get him to the side of the boat. He gives me a quick head shake. You know how they're big and fat, so their whole bodies don't come out. They're just
Little wiggle.
yeah, and he comes off. So I lose my mind. I go to a bigger hook. I get the bigger hook out there, and I'm like, now I got him. Bam, and I lose another one. Bam, and I lose another one, and I'm like, oh my god. So I went to a bigger hook yet. So through the process, I went 3-aught, 4-aught, 5-aught.
You should have gone 2 and 1.
I should have went 2-aught. So then I switched to the 2-aught because the ribbon tail, the 10-inch ribbon tail I was using, it wasn't a giant fat bodied ribbon tail.
Mm-hmm.
It was more slender. I put the 2-aught in. I never lost another fish in the whole tournament.
I think for a lot, me included, when you see a 10, 11, 12-inch bait, even a 6 or 7-inch bait, and you've got this little bitty hook that's Texas rigged up there in the head of it. Now I understand how the fish eat it, like you said, head first with the small, but it just looks like you're asking to not hook them. So the best way I've gotten confidence is when I'm fun fishing, I have gone out and undersized my hook intentionally.
Yeah.
And you would be absolutely shocked
at your landing percentage.
Where you're like, how is the fish getting that freaking hook? But they get it.
They get it. So here's when my philosophy on the hooks changed. And we're going decades back. We're going, 15 years, 20 years back. I do a lot of fly fishing for saltwater species, and I do a lot of steelhead fly fishing where you're catching, 8 to 15 pound trout. And the hooks that I'm using are so small I can hardly see to get the line through the line tie. And you don't lose them. You do not lose them. And so I was like, if I can go and steelhead fish and catch them on a little tiny size 8, and they're jumping, cartwheeling, you're running them down the river, you're chasing after them, they're going under snags. One day I got a good one. It was about a 14 pounder, and it ran me down the river, and I couldn't put the brakes on it with my fly rod. I couldn't put the brakes on it because it was going. So I went after it, and he went underneath. There was a tree that fell over the river, and he went underneath the tree. Well, I couldn't advance farther than the tree because it was underneath. I literally shoved my fly rod under the tree, hopped over the tree, grabbed my fly rod on the other side of the tree, and landed the fish. He never came off. And I caught him on a little streamer with a size 6 streamer hook on it.
So it's itty bitty.
Yeah, and that fish was jumping 100 times. And it wasn't stopping, and it never came off. So I started applying that to bass fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another perfect example is drop shotting. Look at the hooks you're using drop shotting, and you're catching these gigantic smallmouths. They ain't jumping off. You pin them, they're pinned. That hook is forcing itself into the roof of that fish's mouth, where you got a giant gap on a hook, and now you got all this play going on, where the hook's not just crammed up there and just pressing against the fish's mouth, which is another reason why I like these, because the style of this hook keeps that fish pinned right in here.
Yep. So when do you use straight shank when Texas rigging? Is there a time, or do you just have that hook there for demonstration purposes?
Demonstration.
Don't even carry them.
Nope. They're not in my boat.
All right. There you go. That answers that question.
They were in my boat.
Until you started farming them.
And once I started flipping them things, and then they start snagging on everything, I'm like, nope, I'm out. Because I'm not losing fish. I just don't lose fish.
You know, Hallman flips with a EWG. I flip with a straight shank. He'll flip with a 234-aught EWG.
Yeah, see now,
super line hook.
Okay, now this is not exactly an EWG.
Yeah,
an EWG would come straight here.
An EWG would be in line with the point of the hook.
Right, come straight out, and the belly of the beast would be bigger. So the hook point would be in line with here, and then the belly would be deeper to compensate.
Would you say that the most obviously the most common Texas rig mistakes based on what you've talked about over the first 50 minutes, one would be fishing with the wrong size bullet weight.
100%.
Where you're either fishing past the fish or you're spending too much time getting it down to the fish.
Correct.
And then number two for me, based on what you said, would be is that they're mismatching their hook to their bait, so their bait isn't behaving properly.
Correct.
They're basically taking all the action out by putting this giant hunk of metal through it and losing how it was intended to behave.
That's exactly right. Because in every bait, whether it's a worm, a lizard, craw, they move behind the hook. They're always moving, especially.
So pay attention to what the bait is designed, where the ridges, the pinch points, whatever you want to call, where the action is on that bait, and then choose your hook accordingly. I do want to show you this. It is from Z-Man. It just came out this year. Lure Lab pointed it out, and I found it. Have you seen this thing? I bet you probably haven't seen this. This just came out last year. So it's called the Rattlesnaker, and it's a way that you can use like a syringe, basically. Watch this.
Oh, yeah, I see that. I get it.
Isn't that cool?
It is cool, as long as it doesn't take the plastic out of the bait.
No. So you put it in, and then you have that, and then you put your rattle in the little chamber, and then you just stuff it into the plastic, and then you pull it out, and boom, there you go.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, a little slick trick there.
It's pretty sweet, except I don't see a problem with.
No, what you're doing is fantastic. But if you've got if you're trying to put it in something like really skinny or something like that.
Oh yeah, for a Ned rig in the tail section, be perfect. It'd be ideal.
Oh, but you know, and then it recommends the next video. It recommends man chooses to interact with rattlesnake and learns a costly lesson.
Well, that would be a costly lesson.
Yeah, I have no desire to watch that.
Yeah, so that's my take on it. You guys can use any hook, any brand hooks you like, but if you follow that rule of thumb, gap 2 times the thickness of the soft plastic, follow the rule of thumb where you don't want a hook shank that is so long that it's stopping the action of the bait, rattle placement, your success rate will go up. Pay attention to your slip sinker weights, because that's probably the most misunderstood. I have a buddy of mine, if it's not a 3/8 ounce weight, he doesn't throw it.
Lincoln says, I just watched a LureNet video of Frank punching, and he is not whaling on the hook sets. Did I miss how, I'm assuming that's Uncle Frank, sets the hook punching and flipping on a Texas rig? Or can we cover that?
I don't crack them. You're using 50-pound braid when you're punching, and I'm using a Powell 806, which is an 8-foot heavy action rod. So you don't have to crack them. All I do is they take it and I just lift up on them. Don't forget, you're using a 7.5 to 8-foot rod for punching. When you're using braid, so if you move your rod tip 3 feet, you're moving the bait 3 feet. So there's no need to drop to your knees and crush them. When I was teaching Josh how to punch, that's the first thing he did, man. He got a bite and he dropped down and he wailed on it. And
that's the most fun, Frank.
Right, but he broke the braid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so he's like, it was a monster. It was a monster. And I said, well, No, you can't move a 4-pound fish 6 feet underwater on a hook set and not expect damage.
Mm-hmm.
And so he broke the braid. And so I got him. So when he sets the hook, I finally got him. So he just moves that rod a little bit and gets him instead of dropping down and whack. It's not like you're using
Teaching them a
monofilament.
lesson.
Right. It's not monofilament where you got, a half an inch of stretch per foot
Yeah.
of line. You got to remember back in the old days that line stretched.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you make a long cast, you're stretching a half an inch a foot. It's like, whoa, and you got to pick up all that slack that,
Hey, listen, this is an interesting thing on stretch, and I've done this before. Go next time you're somewhere, tie it to the boat cleat, tie to a tree, whatever, and just walk 50, 60 feet away and take the line and do it with, if this is because everyone talks about stretch. This is where I was like, holy cow. Do it with mono, fluoro, and braid. And the braid, yeah. I mean, you're stuck. I mean, you're stopping on the tree. But even with the fluoro, it's amazing how much stretch you can get the further you get away, even though it's reduced stretch. And then mono's like a rubber band. I mean, you can literally stretch it for feet of, I mean, you can go like this and the stretch of it. But that is, when they talk about stretch, I mean, it's one thing to go like this, but get out 30. And I understand it's different properties underwater, but it gives you in your head an idea of what your line is doing when you're setting the hook, when you're fighting that fish, to do that out in your yard with 350 feet to 100 feet sections of braid, fluoro, and mono. And then you kind of understand. But fluorocarbon stretches it a lot too. It's the braid that doesn't.
Right. So mono stretches the most, then fluoro, then braid.
Yep.
So you've got braid has no stretch, fluoro has a little stretch, mono has a ton of stretch. Yep. And you have to remember too, the thinner lines you use, the more stretch they have.
Yep.
Because there's a give and take in breaking strength there. And the stretch compensates for that.
So can we do some rapid fire Texas rig questions?
Yeah.
I saw a couple questions earlier when we were going over rattles of, do you ever substitute a bead for the rattle, that old school bead Texas, bait, hook, bait, bead, Texas rig weight?
Yeah, my buddy Troy does that a lot. He loves.
You guys swear by that. I mean, swear by it.
He loves the bead. I'll beat it if I'm structure fishing with it, because then I'm not so opposed to not pegging my sinker.
Okay.
But if I'm pitching and flipping in cover, I want the sinker pegged, because I don't want the sinker getting ahead of the bait going through the branches, and then my bait's getting all goofy and not going through.
Yep.
So I always peg. But structure fishing, I won't peg. And so I've done that structure fishing. Actually, that technique, this is crazy. You guys I'm going to give you my age. That technique came out in fishermen as a wintertime technique decades and decades ago on suspending bass on long points in the wintertime. And they were using straight tail worms, aka the finesse worm or the trick worm, rigging them Texas style with a slip sinker and the bead, and they were drifting over these points, keeping the bait in where the fish were suspending, and just shaking the rod tip as they were drifting over this stuff. Way before sonars even got good. Yep. They were doing this technique. So there's merit to that, 100%.
Okay. Weight, color. There's natural, there's really shiny tungstens, then there's ones that are coated in different colors, green pumpkins, blacks. Does that matter to you?
I used to paint all my slip sinkers to match each color of soft plastic I had. And that got to be absolutely ludicrous and stupid. So I just went to a dark green pumpkin slip sinker for everything. I don't care if it's dark green pumpkin matted or dark green pumpkin with clear coat on it. I just throw a dark green pumpkin slip sinker. I have another buddy of mine that polishes all his slip sinkers so they look like chrome, and he swears by it. And I can't even stomach that. When I see that thing flipping through the air, I'm like, oh God, I hope you don't catch one, because I'm not doing that.
Lead versus tungsten on the slip sinker.
Tungsten, 1000% all the way. It's smaller, it's less obtrusive, and you feel a little bit more with the tungsten. The cover. I'm in the wood, I'm in the rocks, I'm coming through the grass.
There are several different shapes of Texas rigs out now. There's the punching or flipping weight, and then there's the one that's like kind of the true bullet shape, and then there's some experimental shapes. Does it matter to you whether you use, so that's like a true bullet?
Right, that's what I use.
Okay. So you don't use the punching. So there's some guys that use a punching and it actually has a taper on the back side of it.
No, I'll use the punching weights for punching.
Or flipping weights, but they swear that the cone blows the fish's mouth open, where the taper on more of a flipping weight.
Okay, so that weight right there is not even, it's less, it's about 1/4 of an inch or a little less.
Okay.
So when I rig it up here, and I'm not going to rig it fully, I'm just going to do this to illustrate a point.
Yeah, punching versus flipping.
Going to illustrate a point here. If I don't put the point through my finger. You see how nice that sits on that bait?
Oh yeah, that does sit on that bait incredibly nice.
And that's why I use these, because it takes the taper of the bait I'm using.
I like it.
And that's the reason I use them. You can use a little skinnier one. You know how some of them are a little thinner and longer?
Yep.
Finesse worms and trick worms, little thinner, little longer. The lizard head, it's a nice fat head on the lizard. That's the sinker I just showed you, fits right over the top of it, and it's right at the shape of the head.
Is there an insert in that or not?
In the weight? Yeah. Yeah. There's an insert in this one.
See, it's really weird. There are some companies that advertise, hey, we have an insert in our Texas rig weights. And then there are other companies that advertise insert free. So I have no idea what,
Well, I mean? in the old days when they first started pouring tungsten, they didn't have it smooth on the inside of the hole where the line goes through. They didn't have it smooth. The issue people were coming in contact with when their break-offs were at this point right here. When they set the hook, I'm going to try, when they set the hook and the line goes up like against the nose of the weight.
Oh, it'd cut it.
It would cut it. Well, now they're smooth and they're rounded. So, and then don't forget too, back in the day, we used to peg the weight with a toothpick. now we're using the bobber stoppers, the rubber, so you have bobber
no
stoppers.
Crimping of the line whatsoever.
Right. So you've got flexibility there. So you're not pinching that line against basically a metal edge with a toothpick. And so that's why the inserts are not as important today, because our technology got better, and the bobber stoppers helped eliminate a lot of problems, because when you push that toothpick in the bait, you smush that line, and you know how fluorocarbon is.
It doesn't like that.
One bad kink could ruin a day.
Or make your day, depending on.
Which brings us back to the cat house.
Oh my gosh. All right. Anything else, Frank?
No, I hope
that was good. That was really good. That was an hour and 5 minutes. And I mean, we got into it at the 15-minute mark. So that was a solid 50 minutes.
Yeah, I hope that answers a lot of questions. Like I said, choose your hooks you like. I don't have an issue, so I'm not changing nothing. I don't care what anybody else says. Until I have an issue with losing fish, I stick with what's working. It's just no different than the knot you tie. If a Palomar knot works for you, then you better be tying that Palomar knot.
I like it. You want to do a Q&A show next week?
Yeah. Let's do a Q&A show, because I have a whole bunch of new colors to show you guys, and so we'll show the colors, and then we'll do some questions and answers.
All right. If you're listening to this, I know there's a chance you might not get to listen to the show live. You still want to answer a question to Uncle Frank? Email me, matt@basszone.com. With your question for next week's show, which will run on January
18th.
And then Frank has a little surprise for everybody.
Yeah, I can't wait. It'll be good.
We got both of the did we get both of the Halloween guys out? Because the other one contact.
No, I'm missing.
Okay.
I'm missing.
He messaged me, and I thought I forwarded it to you.
No, send
Maybe
it to
not.
me again. I have the box packed and ready to go.
Okay, we'll do.
All right.
That was good stuff. Basic, but in depth.
There's nothing basic about fishing.
That's how I like my women. Basic, but with some depth.
Yeah, exactly. And now we've come full circle. We started out.
That makes a quality soulmate.
Yes, we started out with the cat house, and now we've come full circle.
Listen, I'm intrigued on that. I'd go spend a half an hour in the cat cafe.
Yeah.
I did a little research on them. They're all over the country. There's all sorts of benefits to it.
Okay.
Health. So personally, I would more likely spend it in a doggy brunch, but I'm not going to turn down a doggy diner.
A doggy diner.
But I'm not going to turn down a cat cafe.
There you go.
All right. This has been another edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish. Next week, same place, same time. We'll
Can't
see
wait.
everybody then. Later.
Adios.